Hi everyone, we are here at Immuta's launch and we are at the Data Plus AI Summit. I'm with Matt, who's the CEO at Immuta. Matt, not a new face to the Ravat show. We've been, obviously learning a lot around data governance, data security, a lot more from you over the years, and you've been a favorite face on the Ravat show.
Oh,
So
thank you.
excited to host you again and learn a lot about what's happening in the not only just in the data security governance space, but also in the AI space. First of all, I know you've been, obviously chatting with a lot of customers, a lot of partners. What have you been hearing? And also a lot of prospects who are like, oh, we want to use Immuta, and how do we do that? So, what's your thoughts on that? What have you been hearing since last 2 weeks?
Yeah, I mean, over the past couple of weeks, I think the focus has been really on how do we allow any potential data consumer to get onto data, right?
Right.
We're seeing this kind of fight for the gravity of data. So all the large compute players are starting to be able to reach out. You're hearing a lot about semantic layers, and the reason is they
Yep.
want to know about everyone's metadata so they can pull it in, not necessarily to make it easier for engineers to work with that data, but to allow anyone to potentially
Right.
use natural language to query it, analyze it, and do something with it. And so that dynamic changes when anyone could be potentially a data consumer because you don't need to know how to write code.
Right.
That changes the architecture and dynamics of the enterprise.
Yeah, that's so true. In a way, we all are like data consumers right now, and in the Gen AI world that we are living in, we're just adding much more data and much more consumption that
Yeah.
we're doing. Um, I also wanted to, quickly bring this example. When a marketing manager can suddenly chat with your database in plain English. How does that, how do you maintain that control without shutting down the magic? If you have any thoughts around that.
Yeah, of course. And that was kind of my previous point is when anyone can be a data consumer, um, you have to take into account the risks around that, right? Where if I equate it to like the E-Trade moment, right?
Yeah.
Before E-Trade, you'd have to call a broker. There was an expert, and then they would
Yeah.
run the transaction down for you, right? But there was a process in place to manage that because the broker was qualified, certified to do that.
Right.
In the era of data, we don't necessarily have that plumbing, right? To have the guardrails, we're not gonna. So before it was to get data, you had a governance team, you had security, you had all these people you'd have to
Exactly.
literally hit. Now you don't. What does that do? So in the case of a marketer, it's their role, it's their purpose, it's the context of why they're trying to access something, and having the classification framework to understand, well, how risky is it? It's the ability to collect why they're asking that question, and it's the ability to have approval workflows
Yep.
to initiate that, whether it's through human or it's automated. So you have to establish new governance processes,
Exactly.
which requires new plumbing underneath the hood to handle their queries and their questions. And then finally, you need to be able to audit what of that marketer got access to, when did they, and retain those records forever.
Exactly. And I think that is one of the biggest things for the enterprises out there as well, and for the marketing managers too. I feel I'm kind of also curious. Most of the companies are writing off one of policies for every
Yeah.
new Gen AI use case. Uh, why is this approach doomed to fail, and what's the alternative here?
Well, I think a lot of people misinterpret Gen AI, right? When they think of Gen AI, I think they think of predominantly like chat interfaces, like a Chat GPT or
Yep.
Claude, et cetera. But there are just so many different use cases. And in large enterprises who we sell to, like the biggest enterprises in the world, there's just so many use cases. And where I'm seeing things go quite quickly is on the agentic side.
Yep.
Is there's no way when you have, let's just say 100,000 employees, you might have 1 million agents running,
Exactly.
right? And there's no way where you can take into account every single use case and every combinatorial factor of what that agent might be trying to get access to some sort of combined data product, right? And so you can't take a rules-based or a deterministic approach to policy any longer because there's just too many people coming in.
Right.
There's too many potential ways to do the control. And so you have to start looking at it from a risk-based perspective. And so I
Right.
go back, you have to add automation. And then two, you also, as you add automated data access through risk versus through rules, then if you give more access, it means you have to take access equally away. So you need to
Right.
establish the ability to revoke access through continuous oversight.
I think that is a very important point. When you kind of give access, you have to take equal access to make sure that things are in place. I'm kind of also curious in this is for the data leaders out there, for those who are drowning in access requests right now. What's the difference between self-service with guardrails and just opening the floodgates? How do you kind of think about that?
Yeah, I tell people, listen, I think it's hard to avoid the floodgate. So,
Right.
so I think it's all relative. I think it's okay to give your business access to data. I think it's okay to work with third parties to give access to data.
Wow.
I don't think we want to stymie access. What I would say is this, though, is as long as you're taking the steps to try to put some guardrails around your most sensitive data,
Exactly.
around your core intellectual property. And by guardrails, I don't necessarily mean like we're just going to lock it down and go in a separate room and that's all you. But what I mean is like, have you set up your domains? Do you have approval workflows set up? Do you know who owns your data in those
Exactly.
domains? And then as you get wiser, it's then through the classification framework, starting to understand your risk, quantifying your risk. This new world, you can't stop data. All you can do is make sure that you have a risk-based approach to kind of overseeing who is doing what with your data in a unified manner. Because you're not going to have one data platform. You're going to have many.
Many.
And
Right.
so it's just managing if you have complete observability of what's going on, then you can manage your risk.
So do you think also being selective for such type of data access that you are allowing, or is it more like over the time we are going to learn from the patterns of people as well and from the departments how they're utilizing the data?
Yeah, exactly. And so like, when you think about that, it's you're building, the whole middleware layer is building its own agentic response to it.
Right.
So as what we will learn is, okay, how often does this person or type of person want to access this type of data? How sensitive is that data? Is there something else going on that is driving that access so we can get ahead of it, right? And our own agents in the governance layer will start to be smart about that, and then be able to infer and assess the risk. Like last week, we announced a risk assistant essentially. So we call it review assist.
Nice.
But essentially, what we're doing is we're analyzing what is the risk to give this person approval. Right?
Exactly.
And so we have to start thinking about like little things like that at scale, at massive scale, for every type of data access, whether it's SharePoint to a flat file sitting in some sort of storage somewhere,
Right.
to like here at Databricks, like into your enterprise warehouse, right?
Wow, I love it. And it kind of also gives more of the freedom to the leaders out there in terms of giving access to the right people and, just making sure that, oh, this was the risk calculation I did and this is what I see. And it made sense to, give the access to maybe these teams of the data that we were just keeping it centralized, right?
Yeah, I think what you just said is really important. It's this concept of decentralizing, right? What
Right.
we need to do is there's always going to be a corporate governance and a CDO and a CISO that needs to oversee at the corporate level.
Right.
But to get successful with data, you need to push to the business because ultimately the business understands their domain of data better than anyone. So you can't not give them access. It's just
Exactly.
managing that access.
Yeah, that's so true. One quick advice that you would have for the CDOs out there, the CIOs who also to an extent own the data, or even for the users, what would you advise in terms of data security, data governance, AI piece? What should they keep in mind?
Yeah, I think over the past couple weeks I've been thinking about one thing, which is really it's the dichotomy of tickets versus like there's two pain points out there.
Yeah.
Ticket management for data access. No one likes tickets. And then the revocation of data. So how do you recertify access? And so my advice to everyone is look at the workflows. Which users or domains and how are they getting access? And if you can map the ticket workflows,
Yeah.
dig in and break that apart, right? So if you, and because then if Then the question is, okay, how do I recertify if we reinvent that process,
Yeah.
how would I recertify people? But I think follow the path of the tickets, because that's where your most pain is. That's where things are getting stuck. And data leaders can figure out, okay, if I can see the path of that ticket and I can make that faster, I think then they can have a significant impact on their business, which is ultimately their job, right? Deliver data to the business.
Exactly. I love it. I love that analogy, but I really think that is something very important for the data leaders to think about as well. Matt, always a pleasure to host you on the Ravit Show. Great insights as always. We'll keep the conversation going and great announcements that you all have done in the last few weeks. We've been following in. Have a great time at Databricks Data Plus AI Summit.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Thank you everyone for joining us today.